7:38, good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Steve and Ellie. We're on your TV, we're online, and we're on your radio.
We're everywhere, there's no excuse. You can find us anywhere. We're going to take you through the front pages for you now. Let's start with Rishi Sunak forging ahead in the Tory leadership race. That's the Times headline.
The Observer says Johnson's return would risk the party's death.
The Sunday Telegraph claims that Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak were urged to strike a deal to avert a Conservative civil war.
For the Sunday Mirror, accusing the Conservatives of not being able to govern themselves.
And finally, the Daily Star leads of the claims of rock star Brian Johnson, who says he was spooked by the ghost of a World War I soldier. Something a little different.
Yeah. Anyway, we're going to have a look at some different stories, actually, in the papers with Deputy Editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers, and anthropologist Marianne Hotter. Good morning to you both.
I'm not a filmmaker.
No, we've taken it out now. You spoilt it.
You didn't like it, Marianne.
You didn't like it, so you're out. You're just an anthropologist.
And Keen Walker.
And Keen Walker, we'll put that in next
Yeah,
time.
that'd be good, thank you.
You forget all your TV credits, so don't count anymore. Fraser, this one we're stunned by. It's to do with cocaine and silver snorters.
Yeah, silver snorters is the headline the Sun have gone with. There's a record number of old age pensioners being treated for coke abuse, a 25% increase on last year. I think it's quite an extraordinary story, and it's a reminder that, you know, we have this sort of stereotype of cocaine users being people in, I don't know, wealthy people, wealthy bankers, maybe kind of the snooty Notting Hill set type people, but actually it's quite a cross-class, cross-age... Except the first thing that sprang to my mind, well, when I first saw it, I thought it was people buying too many cans.
Yeah, let's make that clear to people at home.
But the other thing is, it's generational, isn't it? So it's perhaps these silver snorters are the people who were 30 years ago or whatever, in their prime, as it were, doing it then, and they've just kept going.
Well, one of the things that, one of the interesting details in the story is that it seems a lot of people have sort of picked it up again, and then they are taken aback by the potency of it now, because a lot of drugs are a lot stronger than they used to be. I mean, it's one of the few... So a lot of people say the same thing about marijuana. You know, it's not the same as it was 20 or 30 years ago, and that's been one of the sort of strange consequences of prohibition. Really, is that there's no regulation as to what goes in, how these drugs are made, and actually, you know, so cocaine has got stronger, marijuana has got stronger, and in a way, that's almost I think that's a good argument against, you know, the kind of crackdown on drugs that we have. You know, we've waged a war on drugs, and the drugs have won.
Yeah. I have so many questions about this story, because where are OMPs getting the drugs? Do they text a drug dealer? And I mean, how
they
they...
must do.
Yeah, everyone's got a smartphone these days. But today, I'm assuming. I couldn't imagine my granny texting anyone, let alone, you know, for cocaine. It's not how you're affording it. It's expensive, isn't it?
Well, it's inflation-proof. You know, drugs are one of the few things that their price doesn't rise with inflation. So
no.
I don't know what to make of this story either, because obviously, I mean, it has to be stated, drugs are incredibly harmful. Yeah. They destroy people's lives. But is this a sort of an opportunity for us to sort of challenge our own preconceptions about ageing and what it is to be an older person? And actually, this is like grannies and granddads having a bit of fun when they're not looking after the grandkids.
Yeah, but I thought...
Or is it actually pensioners who are going, life is really dark, and they're seeking escapism? I don't know whether it's a kind of like fun, sunny story, or whether actually it's really depressing and awful.
Our preconceptions about older people tend to be, on mine anyway, is that they've got a bit more common sense.
Frankly, they should know better.
You should know better than to... I mean, honest to goodness, I'm really surprised. I'm really surprised at that.
One of the most shocking headlines we've seen this morning. There's another story. I don't know if this is kind of safe for the breakfast table, but about older people buying products to spice things up for themselves.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I don't have an issue with that.
Okay. Well, no one gets harmed if you buy a personal massager.
Sounds like life begins at retirement.
Yes, exactly.
Well, that's all right. There's nothing wrong with keeping things spiced up, but just don't go snorting things. What are you playing at? If my parents were doing it, I'd be horrified.
Yeah. It's a bit of a worry as well, isn't it? You worry about them overdosing by accident. You just worry.
It's a big worry.
Think of the inheritance.
That's very dark, Stephen.
Well, I mean, it's their own fault.
No, they spent it all at that point. They spent it all. God,
Think about the inheritance in that sense.
Oh, Mary Ann to the Observer, a school budget crisis. It's like so many schools. What's the average that they're going to be in debt by? 250,000 or something?
It's extraordinary. So this story is about, and this is with the. Not only are schools in dire straits already, obviously Jeremy Hunt has made this kind of doom-mongering statement that the next budget, depending on who's in position, whether he's still Chancellor or not, but fundamentally he said, you know, there's going to be painful, eye-watering cuts to public finances. And head teachers normally keep quiet about these things because they don't want to make their school sound like it's struggling. They keep quiet, they keep under the radar, and they let the unions have these arguments in public. But they've come out now, and they're probably going to strike later this year, I would imagine, because things are just untenable. With energy cuts, with energy bills rising so much, they're looking at making cuts, even though it also means they're going to go into debt. And there's one head who says that the conversation that he was having while all this chaos and fiasco was happening at Parliament was, do they hold reserves back ready in preparation for these government spending cuts in order to avoid cutting staff in a few months' time, or do they feed the children who are hungry in their school right now who don't qualify for free school meals? And this is a head, Johnny Utley, he's a headmaster of a head teacher of a secondary school, and he was saying that it's really difficult at secondary school to be able to spot and safeguard those children whose families might be struggling to feed their children for the first time. So they might not be families who already have a relationship with the school where they need support. These are kids who are turning up hungry for the first time. And the impact, if we think about this in the round, the impact is that this has a knock-on effect for those children's whole life output and futures and outcomes. And it has a knock-on impact on their mental health, their physical health, the impact, the burden on social services, and ultimately the criminal justice system. Because if you fall through all the safety nets, that's where you end up.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. And actually the Observer, Fraser, is sort of carrying on this theme, isn't it? Looking at the spending cuts in general. 60 billion quid's worth we need, don't we?
Well,
something of that ilk.
I think, you know, it's almost been decided, seemingly by Jeremy Hunt, that austerity and spending cuts are going to be the way out of this problem, or at least to sort of calm the markets in response to Liz Truss's mini budget. But there are consequences to spending cuts, and one of those that's been identified in the Observer is that it will actually mean a deeper recession this winter. So I think it's a bit of a lesson in the fact that we can't just assume that the markets are all-knowing. If that's what's pushed us to this, I'm not sure that they want a recession either.
Can I say I'm very confused by this, in that, and considering I talk about politics every day of my life, and I can't get my head around it, the mini-budget hasn't been implemented, right? The big spend on capping energy bills is reduced to 6 months now, but that's still a very big expense. But they've saved, with getting rid of the tax cuts and all the rest of it, they've saved something like 30-odd billion that they were going to spend, right? So we're not going to have to borrow that. So how is all this in response to the mini-budget, and how have we gone from saying we're going to borrow, you know, tens and tens of billions of pounds to give tax cuts, to saying actually the reality is we need to save billions and billions of pounds and have austerity cuts? I don't know how we've suddenly switched. It's like we've flipped the coin entirely.
Yeah, and some of it doesn't actually make much sense, but there is an effect from the mini-budget in the sense that interest rates will go up faster than expected. That increases the cost of any borrowing that, you know, we might want to do, that we will need to do as the economy presumably goes into recession. And it has spooked our politicians into thinking, let's not, you know, put a foot wrong. Let's appear disciplined.
So it's forced them the other way.
Yeah, essentially.
But it's false, because you want politicians and our economists who are setting these policies that have real terms impacts on all our lives. You want them to be making those decisions based on the facts, not on what curries best favour with whoever, you know, is on the soapbox at this moment. Because fundamentally, Fraser and I were talking about it. It's this myth that the money markets have an inherent and honest logic to them, that these are kind of real decisions and real facts. It's still people, and it's people making qualitative, judgment-based decisions based on what they think might happen.
But it's
not what's in our best interest. That's when you need politics.
But you have to view the money markets as almost like a living entity, don't you? They don't.
Yeah, but they're an illogical living entity.
Yeah.
They're as irrational as you and I. So we shouldn't go, oh, well, that's what's going to happen. We must service that so that it can be free to do what it likes. It's a tool that enables us to live in a society that we want to live in.
But if it goes in the wrong direction, as we saw after the mini-budget, things start to go very wrong, then it negatively affects us all very badly.
That's why I think we need better regulation. One of the things that the outcome of Liz Truss's and Kwasi Kwarteng's mini-budget was this big sell-off of bonds and gilt. This kind of thing that no one's ever heard of and quite understands. But fundamentally, it was an automatic trigger in the markets because all these pension funds who are hugely invested and basically in hock suddenly went, we can't afford to keep hold of these things, so we have to sell it, and the price drops, and so they sell it at a loss. And that bit hasn't been resolved.
No,
that bit is still...
But what makes
our
that...
money is invested in things that aren't solid.
But what makes that hugely difficult is that we blame a lot of that, and there's a lot of concern over that, and pension funds and all the rest of it. But that's happening across the world.
It is, but we need to regulate those money markets.
Well,
that's exactly what happened in 2008. But
the subprime mortgage market.
Exactly, and it knocked us into a global recession, and we're still feeling the knock-on impacts of that now, and we're going to go into another global recession, partly because of the pandemic, partly because of the war in Ukraine and difficulties of global supply chains and cost of energy. There are things that we can do. Austerity is a political choice. It's not an essential necessity. It's not like breathing air. It's a political choice, and we get a say in whether we want that or not. And we do need to exercise our voices. You know, write to your MP, send them an email and tell them what you think.
As much as I'd love to move on to another story, I don't know if we've quite got time. So just on this one, Fraser, is part of it. I mean, Marianne's right. It is a political choice, but the alternative, and if Labour were to come in and say, well, we're not, we'll go on the argument, well, we're not going to have austerity, we're not going to have spending cuts at this level, but that is ultimately therefore they're going to have to fund stuff somehow, so that'd be tax rises presumably. So it still affects us.
Well, presumably, yeah, and the other thing is to have a plan for growing the economy. If you have if GDP is larger, then there's no need to scrimp and save on public services, and that has been actually the big weakness, certainly of the past 15 years. The economy has not been growing fast enough, productivity certainly not been growing fast enough, and that means that we can't afford the services that we deserve. That's why we already have the highest tax burden for 50 years. Yeah. It's not because the government loves putting up taxes. They would, in all their manifestos, not just Truss, saying that they want to be tax cutting. Rishi Sunak keeps saying, I want to.
They all do, but they're going to do it. Oh, don't you dare. Because we're out of time. Marianne Hotter, Fraser Byers, thank you very much.
Thanks.
But you can't be saying the next hour.
Okay.
So you look.
I've still got another hour. We'll be back.
Yeah.